And showtime! Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the ChannelPro 5-Minute Roundup. A look at news, trends, and tips for the SMB channel in 5 minutes or thereabouts. My name is Rich Freeman. I'm executive editor of the ChannelPro Network, also a co-host of this program. I am joined this week, as I am every week, by your other co-host, Eric Simpson, business transformation and improvement advisor to MSPs and other IT providers. Eric, good to see you again.
It certainly is. It's good to see you too, Rich. It's an odd comment. Would you care to elaborate?
Well, as regular fans of this program know, last week when we attempted to film, so normally we do this both as an audio podcast and as a video. Not so much on the video side last week because I was at ChannelCon in the middle of a thunderstorm when we were trying to record. You were back home in Southern California, Eric, and at Wi-Fi issue, we could not get on video together to do the show. So it was a minor miracle we were able to get the show down on audio and distribute it that way, but we did not have video for you last week because we could not capture it under the technological circumstances.
Yes, last week's episode was a first for the Channel Pro 5 Minute Roundup, an audio only version of the podcast instead of inclusive with video. But yeah, it is
You're
good to see
right.
you. Good to see you, brother.
Yeah.
And you're recently back you jumped from Channel Con to another event. So you've experienced a lot of travel, probably more than normal so far this year. Share with everybody where you're just back from.
Yeah, I just got back from the latest Channel Pro SMB Forum event in Charlotte, North Carolina. We just did that 2 days ago as we record this. It was phenomenal. We were also excited about the crowd and the energy and the content. The speakers were amazing. So it was a really, really great time. I won't dwell on it except to say that we've got two more of these events coming up beginning of September, the week before DattoCon, if that kind of helps orient you. We will be in the Washington, D.C. area, same area as DattoCon. And then at the beginning of November, we'll be in Southern California, in Los Angeles. And if you are interested to join us for either or both of those events, go to events.channelpronetwork.com. There's still plenty of time to register for both of those events to learn about the content that we're presenting. Those are coming up. We hope to see you there.
Great events. Don't miss them, folks. All right, Rich. Awesome. You're back from travel, back from, weather and technological gremlins. What's our top story today?
Well, you know what? A busy week at this conference, but I did manage to get a story in about something that I know is going to be of interest to a lot of folks in our audience right now. Anyone who does business with Kaseya is familiar with the fact that since November of 2020, there has been a policy in effect at Kaseya that basically says if you are on their auto renewal plan for any of their products, when your renewal date comes around, they will automatically move the terms of your contract, the duration of your contract, from wherever it is now to the greater of 3 years or whatever the previous term was. So if you had a 5-year deal, they would roll you over at 5 years, say. But if you had a 1-year deal, when the renewal date came around, they would automatically move you up to 3 years. Partners were not happy about this, to put it mildly. And it's just been a constant source of complaints ever since late 2020 when this happened. Earlier this year, when word broke that Kaseya had purchased Datto, it immediately bubbled back to the surface because the Datto partners, who were familiar with this from their Kaseya friends, some of whom were both Datto and Kaseya partners, they were concerned that, well, now all of my Datto products are going to be, I'm going to get pushed into 3-year terms. What Kaseya announced this week is they hear you, partners. They hear this feedback. They understand that you are unhappy with this policy, and they have changed things going forward. And this is in effect now, in effect immediately. Basically, the next time your auto renewal date comes around, they will roll you over at the same term you are in now. Now, let me unpack that a little bit because there are a few things going on there. So if you have a 1-year deal with Kaseya today, when your next auto renewal date comes up, it'll roll over at 1 year. If you have a 3-year deal right now, and let's just say you had a 1-year deal, they bumped it up to 3, even though you didn't ask them to, and you're now on a 3-year deal, they're going to roll you over again at 3 years unless you step. If you want to go back to 1 year, you need to contact them and tell them that. But they are no longer going to automatically bump anyone up to that 3-year plan. Now, I will pass along. I'm quite sure there are some Kaseya partners who will not necessarily be uh, comforted by this at all, but I just will, in fairness to Kaseya, pass along their explanation for why they did this. They have for a long time offer, and most vendors do this. They were offering their partners a discount for a longer term commitment. My understanding is that discount went up when they introduced this new license agreement late 2020. So that we're talking about like a 70% difference between a 1-year deal and a 3-year deal. And they said, look, we were in this position where we can roll the 1-year deal over to 1 year and everyone's going to see this big price hike. Or we can bump them up to 3 years and their pricing is going to stay the same or maybe even go down. And so we decided the lesser of two evils there. We'll put them on the 3-year deal. We'll save them some money. We'll give them some, longer term certainty on that pricing. And that's what they felt that was the right thing to do for their partners. The partners said, you didn't flag that for us early enough. You didn't call attention to it loud enough. We've got a lot going on. We didn't know it was coming. Next thing you know, we're on a 3-year deal, and this isn't something that we asked for. So no more of that. Kaseya said that if you are on a deal at any time, basically, that you have a contract you don't like, you can now cancel that contract. And that's true right now. If you got bumped up from 1 year to 3, you're unhappy about it, reach out to your account manager and you can now cancel the contract. You can opt out of the auto renewal program anytime you want. This was not true before. And they're going to start notifying partners of their renewal date and the implications of that in terms of what the new contract's going to look like 90 days in advance instead of 60 days in advance. And they're going to send out twice as many notifications as before so that very busy MSPs aren't maybe going to miss that communication. So unhappy partners, Kaseya heard them, and they have taken some action this week that I'm sure will be welcomed by Kaseya partners who were not happy about the way things were working before.
Yeah, Rich, and sometimes lessons are learned, after an action is taken. That post-mortem process, right? I would argue that, Kaseya, may have been able to do a little bit more communication wise. I mean, 2020, I think, the argument that I read in your article was, well, look, we've been messaging these partners, it's in the terms and conditions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, they felt, out of an abundance of trying to save their partners money, this was the right thing to do. I think the lesson learned here as well, I think there was a marketing opportunity that might have been missed, candidly, right? If Kaseya would have said, hey, listen, we want to save you guys 70% on your licensing, we want you to roll over into this new 3-year plan. It might have been taken a little bit differently. But of course, with, 30,000, partners, right? That can get a little cumbersome, right? So again, I think their intentions were good. I think the lesson here is we're dealing with MSPs. MSPs are busy. MSPs can be loud. MSPs can be grouchy. I can speak about my MSP brethren as a recovering MSP myself, right? I get it, right? So I think there's something to be learned on both sides here, right? I think Kaseya did the right thing. They made some dramatic changes to the entire program, right? More messaging for a longer duration before. Partners can cancel now. No longer will they be auto-renewed and things like that. I bet now this might have the opposite impact on these partners. And, once they realize what, the renewal price for a year, the next year will be, it might cause them to think twice and maybe influence them to say, no, sign me up for that 3-year deal anyway, right? So, just again, you cannot predict, what's going to happen when you're dealing with such a large channel of partners, right? So, yeah, I think everybody, learned from this.
Agreed. And one last note before we move on. One lesson learned maybe for the partners, because Kaseya kept kind of coming back to the point that none of this was hidden from the partners. It was spelled out in the contract,
Right.
and people were signing the contracts without, reading them closely, and so they didn't notice that that change was in there. Which again, I understand, because who has time to read that all the end user license agreements, but there might be a lesson learned there. Basically, if you're signing a contract, and especially if it has to do with something very important to your business, you do probably want to take a close look at it. Well, speaking of lessons learned, Eric, time for your tip of the week, and I'm guessing it has to do with something that might stem back from a lesson learned in your MSP days.
Well, yeah, definitely a lesson learned from my MSP days, but also a lesson learned from a new client that I'm working with, consulting wise, that was taken aback by a new client canceling an agreement with them where they had just recently been onboarded 90 days prior. And as we unpacked, what happened here, and this was, no one, um, you know, no one expects a brand new client to terminate an agreement, right? I mean, it's just we don't, especially in such a short time frame. So, the idea here is what did we take away from this? What can we do as NMSPs to ensure that a client is nothing but overjoyed in that during that honeymoon period, and the partner didn't do anything wrong from what they did, but what the insight was is one thing that we could change is during onboarding is to create a shared accountability between us and our client. The client expects, let's just take a hypothetical situation. The client expects they're going to pay an MSP all this money and the MSP is just going to do everything. Well, Rich, we know that's not how this works, right? It is a partnership. We're going to work together for the improvement and the improved outcome of that business. And this doesn't need to be only focused on a managed service agreement. It can be any project, right? There has to be some shared accountability between the client and the MSP. And I like to structure a process where during the kickoff meeting, I have an agreement. There's a template on my website that partners can get that says this is the agreement between us, the project kickoff agreement. It spells out some very specific things. The phases of the project, what the success criteria of the project are going to be, who's involved in the project, the points of contact, and what the responsibility is by the provider, as well as what the client's responsibility is. And number one, the client has to approve change quickly, right? So that we can achieve the outcome that we're working towards. And number two, we have to be on top of that process, not simply through the onboarding process, but afterwards. And I think the modification that I would encourage MSPs and channel pros to take now is to assign a single point of contact to your clients during the onboarding and honeymoon period, right? So this can be a client success manager, a client experience manager. We've started hearing about these roles recently, Rich, and this is a single point of contact that is checking in with the client throughout the entire process and beyond, like for that first 90 days after they've been onboarding, and checking in and making sure that their expectations are being met. Now, granted, in the scenario that I described with a particular partner recently, there was improvement to be made in the communication process between each other. And here's another takeaway from this. The users had never experienced this type of solution before. They were being onboarded, really moving and migrating them more toward the cloud, virtual desktops, and things like that. So this has been a client that was really accustomed to working on their desktops and laptops, and there really wasn't a lot of oversight on how the users were using the technology, right? It was a smaller organization, and in order to get the best cloud experience, we want to make sure that our devices are, hardwired into the network, not on wireless and things like that. And so there was a lot of freedom where the users were actually kind of going outside of the box in trying to leverage the new implementation and migration, and they were being frustrated. And so the takeaway here is appoint a single point of contact to make sure that there's shared accountability between the client and the channel pro, and make sure that if there is a termination clause in your agreement, it's not simply for convenience. I think this is what kind of one of the big takeaways was, the client could cancel if they weren't happy. Well, let's make sure that there are some prerequisites for that, and let's make sure that there is cancellation for cause without remedy, i.e., the client and their users have to do these things, go through training, make sure they use the technology properly, things like that. We have a single point of contact checking and making sure that's all working. And if they are unhappy, they're going to let us know, and we have 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, depending upon the term of the agreement, to remedy that. Now, should we then fail to remedy that situation, then of course the client has every right to cancel the agreement, because that's on us now, right? But I think just kind of that sometimes we get caught up in, and maybe it's just onboarding, and maybe we get unrealistic about how much we should budget for onboarding and how much that actually costs us as an MSP, and reevaluate that cost and incorporate the cost of that person that's going to be the single point of contact now, right? And raise our prices so that we do a great job and hopefully satisfy our clients. They're delighted because that onboarding went correctly and we're holding them accountable just like they're holding us accountable. And at the end of the day, we're better together as strategic business partners.
Well, it is interesting. You can see the parallel to the Kaseya story we were talking about before, and that a lot of this has to do with communication, being very clear about what's going to happen and the expectations on both sides and why that is. And also, during that critical onboarding phase, at least, communicating frequently enough to really have an eye on how satisfied the customer is with the process, how well it's going. You're probably not going to be in touch as often after onboarding is done, but during that really critical, as you said, honeymoon phase of the relationship, you really want to be in touch a little more often than usual, and making sure that you're living up to their expectations of what you're going to do for them. Well, Eric, that leaves us with time for just one more story this week. And, because of the unusual circumstances last week, we couldn't get to the one more story. If we had, it would have had to do with a company that had a job position open for a professional candy taster, which actually sounded like a pretty good gig. But there's an even better gig in the news this week that I have finally found a job I am overqualified for, Eric. And this is a position from Casper, the people who make the mattresses that you can buy online. They are hiring Casper sleepers, professional sleepers, people who will sleep for a living for Casper. You're going to be doing that in their stores. I'm quoting from the job listing: in our stores and in unexpected settings out in the world. And pretty much that's what your job will be. It will be to sleep. There is also some social media sharing that they expect you to do. But beyond that, pretty much all you need to do is sleep. And you know what the worst part of the story is, Eric, is we are recording this right now on August 11th. Today is the cutoff, the deadline for applying. So I'm sorry, folks, if this sounds as good to you as it did to me, it's too late.
Yeah, getting paid to sleep. Yeah, that is pretty unique. So, I'm reading the article, Rich. They want people that are a little bit of an influencer, right? They want people to blog about it. They want people to share it on social media. Actually, part of the application process is to, show some sort of post that you would make or videos of you sleeping. I mean, it's very interesting and a little bit oddball, but hey, it's these marketing wizards, right? They come up with these ideas.
Well, that is all the time we've got this week for you, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. We are, every week except last week, we are both a video and an audio podcast. If you're watching the video right now, but you listen to podcasts, go to wherever you get your podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, Apple. You're going to find us there. Please subscribe, rate, review. We really appreciate it. If you're listening to the podcast, but you want to join us on video, best thing to do is go to YouTube and specifically look for the ChannelPro Network channel there. Another opportunity to become a subscriber. If you click that little bell icon, you'll even get notified when the new episodes go up. To read more about Kaseya's policy change on auto renewals and get all sorts of great business growth advice for your company, please visit channelpronetwork.com every day, because we have got terrific new content for you going live there every day. You want to learn more about Erick and the work he does with his clients, you should go to ericksimpson.com. That is ERICK Simpson.com. Once again, folks, we join you. So thank you so much for joining us. We're going to be back again next week with another episode. Until then, please enjoy the rest of your week. Erick and I are enjoying the rest of your week already.